One introduction RAWSEP view: the United States government was on track in the Biden administration to reduce the prices for both clean energy heat pumps and clean energy electric cars. Trump tariffs are expected to upset those plans to prevent future air pollution and prevent climate change. The United States government should, instead of certifying wood stoves as safe when they are not safe, go forward with regulations that ban wood stove use and direct government money for use of forest refuse only. For home building and furniture building, for just a few examples of use of forest products for non-burning uses, it is well known from scientific and medical research that wood burning is a substantial source of PM 2.5 emissions, yet the wood burning industry uses the scientifically debunked theory named carbon neutrality of wood burning to argue that wood burning replacing coal burning in industry, and in a trickle-down argument that wood burning should continue for home heating should continue. Presumably because it is called renewable, wood may be renewable in the sense that a tree can be planted in the place of a cut-down burned tree, but it takes centuries or decades for the newly planted tree to attain the stature of the cut-down burned tree. During those centuries or decades, photosynthesis, which converts CO2 to oxygen and so sequesters some carbon, will not take place at the same rate as photosynthesis was performed previously, and wood burning emits both CO2 and PM 2.5, and PM 2.5 is not absorbed by trees, so PM 2.5 is not diminished by planting a tree in the place of a cut-down and burned tree. In fact, a living tree closes its pores against the presence of PM 2.5 from nearby wood burning, just as humans hold their breath in the presence of PM 2.5 from nearby wood burning. And when a tree closes its pores, the level of photosynthesis that absorbs CO2 pollution goes down. Wood burning emits 90% PM 2.5 particulate matter of 2.5 micrometer size, the perfect size to infiltrate the human lungs, setting off a cascade of human health problems and early deaths. Contrary to many beliefs, wood burning emits 2.8 times the PM 2.5 as the fossil fuel coal burning, and wood burning emits 450 times the PM 2.5 as the fossil fuel natural gas burning. Replacing coal burning with wood burning creates more air pollution in the form of CO2 and PM 2.5 than coal burning. This emission data comes from testing the cleanest burning wood stove in the United Kingdom, the Eco-Design Wood Stove, and International Convention does not count the emissions from wood burning. The emissions from wood burning are erased from all countries around the world when calculating if each country has met its climate goals. This non-counting or erasure of wood burning emissions data from climate goals does not mean wood burning emissions do not exist. RAWSEP view: purple air PM 2.5 monitors hanging from the eaves of the house of a near neighbor should be used to measure the level of PM 2.5 in the air hyperlocally in the yards of near neighbors of indoor residential wood burners. If PM 2.5 levels exceed World Health Organization standards of 5 micrograms per cubic meter annually, then that evidence of air pollution from wood burning should lead to the shutdown of that indoor residential wood burning appliance, one appliance at a time if necessary.
Hi, my name is Lily. Andrew gave you the intro to Residents Against Wood Smoke Emission Particulates and their concern for air pollution from indoor residential wood burning. Residents Against Wood Smoke Emission Particulates, or RAWSEP, would like every near neighbor of an indoor residential wood burner whose wood smoke enters their yards and sickens the near neighbors to have a purple air PM 2.5 monitor hanging from the eaves of their home to measure the level of PM 2.5 entering their yards. That measurement of air pollution should be used as evidence of unnecessary air pollution, and each indoor residential wood burner should be shut down based on that evidence, one indoor residential wood burner at a time if necessary. The presentation by Andrew ended at 2 minutes 5 seconds. The same presentation by Emma starts at 2 minutes 3 seconds before the end of this podcast. So I am Lily, your timekeeper, and you can start the next podcast at 2 minutes 5 seconds in if you would not like to see the presentation by Andrew a second time. This presentation by me, Lily, ends at 5 minutes in. What you will see in the main content of this RAWSEP podcast will be news about air pollution from indoor residential wood burning, and how that air pollution is being combated by ordinary people just like you who are unfortunately near neighbors of indoor residential wood burners at this time. There will also be news about unnecessary and highly polluting use of wood as fuel in industrial wood burners and preventable air pollution from wood burning wildfires. There will also be news about air pollution from PM 2.5 from gas-powered cars. There will also be news about airborne diseases which are also preventable with vaccines such as COVID-19 and measles and whooping cough, to name just a few. In 2025, Residents Against Wood Smoke Emission Particulates is also concerned with combating the Trump destruction of government funding for programs which protect human health through the Department of Health and Human Services, and Trump destruction of programs which fund the science and medical research plan to protect human health from preventable illnesses. Protecting human health is a patriotic act, and our defense against enemies is weakened if we are not as healthy as we can be. Heat pump rebates are now offered by the federal government, distributed through the eligible United States, are available in 2025, and are the best, cleanest, and now cheapest alternative to indoor residential wood burning if that burning is actually done to purportedly save money. Wind and solar as sources of the electricity that powers heat pumps and electric cars is also cheaper than burning wood. The adverse health effects that are caused by indoor residential wood burning also come at a cost to near neighbors, both in shortening and ending their lives, and in actual hospital, clinic, and funeral costs. Instead of being compensated monetarily, near neighbors should instead be able to achieve immediate relief by stopping indoor residential wood burning in their hyper-localized neighborhoods, which relief readings from purple air PM 2.5 monitors used as evidence of air pollution will help them achieve. Welcome to news about hopeful scientific and medical achievements that will also help us achieve the goal of clean air to breathe.
Webisode 57DHXXT September 26, 2025 Pocket Rescissions Sound Obscure, but they are a big deal. In Webisode 57DHXXT 1 Trump Economy Opinion Pocket Rescissions Sound Obscure, but they are a big deal 2 Movies 1 Battle After Another Review The Paul Thomas Anderson Rallying Cry 3 RFK Jr. Vaccine Denials RFK Jr. says the U.S. rejects global health goals 4 New Jersey race for governor vaccine skepticism takes center stage in a close race for New Jersey governor main content. 1 Trump Economy Opinion Pocket Rescissions Sound Obscure, but they are a big deal excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against would smoke emission particulates of 501c3 nonprofit organization, the New York Times September 26, 2025 Another needless government shutdown may soon be upon us. Politically, these events have proved fleeting, but this funding deadline carries a long-term threat to the separation of powers and Republicans. Would be wise to take it seriously. The Trump administration is making a frontal challenge to the power of the purse of Congress, and Congress seems either unwilling or unable to do anything about it. This reflects a broader troubling trend. Our legislative branch has become subordinate to the executive through years of passivity. Congress must stand up to this exigent threat or risk losing more of its power. The details of this threat, called a pocket rescission, may sound technical, but the ramifications are significant. This is about who controls government spending and whether a president can single-handedly cancel money appropriated by law. The issue at hand is the effort of the Trump White House to reverse nearly $5 billion included in the 2025 foreign aid budget. Late last month, President Trump submitted what is called a rescissions request under the Impoundment Control Act Passed. In response to the Nixon presidency, this 1974 law exists to ensure presidents do not ignore the will of Congress by failing to spend appropriated funds. The law also formalized a procedure for presidents to propose canceling funds under ordinary circumstances. After a president submits a request, Congress has 45 days to approve it. If Congress does nothing, the rescission request expires and the funds get spent. This is because spending laws are not just suggestions. Congress must agree to cancel the spending, but in this case, the White House submitted its rescissions request near the close of the fiscal year, essentially running out the clock. Agencies can hold on to those funds while a request is being considered, but are barred from spending money after the fiscal year ends on September 30th. This is so that by the time the 45-day window is up, the White House can claim this foreign aid money is no longer available to spend. Even if Congress did not approve the request of the White House, it is a clever gambit designed to help presidents game the system and undermine the appropriations process, but there are ways to stop it. 2 Movies 1 Battle After Another Review The Paul Thomas Anderson Rallying Cry Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against would smoke emission particulates of 501c3 nonprofit organization, the New York Times September 26, 2025 The New York Times Paul Thomas Anderson Movie 1 Battle After Another is an exciting, goofy, and deadly serious big screen negative answer to what is seen as evil. This movie is a no to complacency, to oppression, to tyranny. It is a carnivalesque epic about good and evil, violence and power, inalienable rights, and the fight against injustice. It is also a love story. The film speaks to the failures of the past and of the present, but insists on the promise of the future. It is brilliantly directed, but what makes it exhilarating is that it engages with its moment, as few American fiction films do. It feels shockingly urgent. It is also snort out funny, even when its laughs tremble with rage. 1 Battle After Another charts the misadventures of a glorious fool, Bob Ferguson, Leonardo DiCaprio, wholly rising to the buffoonish occasion. A revolutionary foot soldier turned hunted terrorist, underground fugitive, and doting single dad. Set largely in the present, the story takes flight some 16 years earlier, during the explosive tenure of Bob in the French 75, a radical group, presumably phony, that shares its name with a field gun and a cocktail that the Humphrey Bogart nightclub serves in Casablanca. The beliefs of the group are pretty straightforward: equality, freedom, if fuzzy on specifics, and Anderson does not spell out its revolutionary ideology like his characters. He generally prefers putting theory into action. 3 RFK Jr. Vaccine Denials RFK Jr. says the U.S. rejects global health goals. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against would smoke emission particulates of 501c3 nonprofit organization, the New York Times September 26, 2025 Health Secretary RFK Jr. on Thursday said the United States would reject a United Nations Declaration on Chronic Diseases because it ignored the most pressing health issues, and more broadly, because the Trump administration takes issue with policies that he described as promoting abortion and radical gender ideology. Kennedy, who gave his remarks to a UN meeting on preventing and combating chronic illnesses like cancer, cardiovascular disease, and diabetes, did not elaborate on the issues he said had been ignored. The text of the UN declaration does not mention reproductive rights or gender ideology. The word gender appears several times in the document, but only in the context of the specific health challenges facing women. Despite opposition from the United States, the declaration is expected to win approval from a majority of the United Nations' 193 member states in October. For New Jersey race for governor with Democrat Mikey Sherrill and Republican Jack Ciattarelli, RFK Jr. Vaccine denials, vaccine skepticism takes center stage in a close race for New Jersey governor. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against would smoke emission particulates of 501c3 nonprofit organization, the New York Times September 26, 2025 The New York Times as immunization rates fall, vaccine skepticism grows as a wedge issue. Jack Ciattarelli, the Republican nominee for governor of New Jersey, spoke at an event run by an opponent of vaccine mandates. We cannot trust him to keep New Jersey kids safe. Mikey Sherrill, the Democratic candidate, said the Jack Ciattarelli appearance came as a new independent poll showed the race for governor of New Jersey tightening. Jack Ciattarelli, the Republican candidate for governor of New Jersey, stood in front of a debate audience on Sunday and said that he supported childhood vaccines and the New Jersey role in expanding the number of children who are immunized. 4 days later, Ciattarelli was a featured guest at an event hosted by a group that has emerged as one of the main opponents of mandatory vaccination in New Jersey. The keynote speaker was a doctor who has falsely falsely claimed that the COVID-19 vaccine magnetizes patients. They can put a key on their forehead, it sticks, the Dr. Sherry. Tenpenny testified in 2021 in Ohio. They can put spoons and forks all over them, and they can stick the Sciadarelli appearance at the New Jersey Public Health Innovation Political Action Committee PAC Health Freedom Gala in Hazlet, New Jersey on Thursday came as the Trump Health Secretary RFK Jr. has elevated immunization skeptics and limited access to COVID vaccines nationwide on Monday. In an extraordinary White House address, Trump also warned pregnant women that Tylenol has been linked to autism in claims unsubstantiated by science. The Sciadarelli appearance also came as a new independent poll showed the race for New Jersey governor as tightening, and as battle to energize the base of each party intensified ahead of the November 4th election. Headlines: The New York Times, September 26, 2025. Air pollution caused by wood-burning, climate change mitigation strategizing at a New York Times event. Opposing views on climate change collide. The New York Times: air pollution caused by wood-burning, California, Los Angeles fire fighting errors. LA wildfire evacuations were slowed by poor visibility and system weaknesses. The New York Times: assassination attempt on Gerald Ford. Sarah Jane Moore, would-be assassin of President Ford, dies at 95. The New York Times: Alabama justice and mercy, son of mother killed by Jeffrey West urges Alabama to halt execution. The New York Times: aviation, NASA Artemis II astronauts aim to make space great for all. The New York Times: Colorado weather, elk hunters found dead at San Juan Forest had been struck by lightning. The New York Times: consumers fashion, London Fashion Week style on and off the runway, plaids, pleats, and tulle. The New York Times: consumers games influencers. Human interest in good triumphing over evil. Meredith Marks talks RHOSLC rumors and nastiness party game. The New York Times: consumers food, 5 dairy myths that make experts sour. The New York Times: consumers food recipes, Chantilly cake with berries recipe. Consumers food, the 3 best mayonnaises of 2025 reviews by Wirecutter. Consumers fish themed merchandise, 12 fish forward gifts we love reviews by Wirecutter. Consumers hair brushes, this detangling brush made brushing my fine hair tolerable reviews by Wirecutter. Consumers hair straighteners tested the Dyson Airstraight and it created more problems than it fixed reviews by Wirecutter. Consumers reading Ravi Alameddin on his favorite books and his new novel. The New York Times: consumers reading a shop for Black women who love books. The New York Times: consumers organizers that old bookcase it may be your dream shoe organizer reviews by Wirecutter. Consumers: Trump tariffs, who pays for U.S. tariffs and where does the money go? The New York Times: farmers, the U.S. and China Trump tariff. Soybeans were the biggest export to China from America, now sales are down to 0. The New York Times: housing, New York City Hudson Yards developer may get another $2 billion boost from New York. The New York Times: human interest, is it ever wise to stay together for the kids? The New York Times: Louisiana phones 911 service is restored in Louisiana and Mississippi. The New York Times: medicine and science anticipated death from cancer. A French resident has a daughter who left home to attend school in England. Human interest dress rehearsal for a wedding I will never attend. The New York Times: Minnesota Democrat loses seat in Minnesota House as Republicans lose seat in Minnesota House when Republican dies of natural causes. So balance of power in Minnesota House unchanged. Ex-Minnesota lawmaker gets 6 months in jail for burglary. The New York Times TV show Colbert investigates the Trump claim of escalator sabotage. The New York Times TV show how South Park keeps rolling in the Trump-era Cannonball podcast. The New York Times music, how Jeff Tweedy made a new magnum opus. The New York Times movies, marketing movies is harder than ever, and here comes one battle after another. The New York Times music review Peen Patty, a tenor with an affinity for French poetry and rugby. The New York Times internet opinion, this is a dangerous time to empower Google. The New York Times: medicine and science, mosquito-borne illness rarely seen in U.S. is suspected on Long Island. The New York Times: redistricting, readers have their own suggestions on redistricting. The New York Times: Trump economy opinion, the game is rigged. Elizabeth Warren on the next story in America. The New York Times: Trump economy sports, President Trump suggests moving 2026 World Cup games from cities he deems unsafe. The Athletic: Trump education, medicine and science, what declines in reading and math mean for the U.S. workforce. The New York Times: Trump Justice Department Comey read the indictment of James Comey. The New York Times: Trump Kirk actions opinion, I am a liberal faculty advisor for the Kirk Group, that is not a contradiction. The New York Times: Trump Kirk actions opinion, Trump is lying about left-wing terrorism. The New York Times: Trump tariffs, Trump will slap tariffs on imported drugs, trucks, and household furnishings. The New York Times: Trump tariffs, the Trump new tariffs shock countries reeling from his chaotic trade war. The New York Times: Trump tariffs, wary European drug makers think they can avoid the Trump latest tariffs. The New York Times: Trump tariffs, see the Trump latest tariffs on countries and products. The New York Times: Trump and TikTok purchase from China opinion, a U.S. sale is not enough. Here is how to make TikTok safer. The New York Times: Trump UN visit opinion, Trump at the UN a bitter display. The New York Times: TV star Democrat, what is behind Nexstar and Sinclair boycotting Jimmy Kimmel. The New York Times: Trump Justice Department Comey, who might the Trump administration go after next. The New York Times: TV star Democrat, why companies like Disney and Paramount are caving to Trump. The New York Times: Trump Justice Department Comey, with Comey indictment Trump gets retribution but shatters norms. The New York Times: Trump actions brain drain to China as the Trump H-1B visa fee targets foreign workers, China woos them. The New York Times: Trump actions 3 school districts to lose $65 million over gender and DI policies. The New York Times: Trump business Amazon to pay $2.5 billion in Prime membership settlement. The New York Times: Trump Justice Department Comey, 4 takeaways from the Trump securing of an indictment against Comey. The New York Times: Trump Justice Department Comey, a timeline of the Trump-Comey relationship. The New York Times: Trump Justice Department Comey brief, Comey indictment prompts questions and criticism. The New York Times: Trump Justice Department Comey, James Comey, former FBI director, indicted after pressure from Trump. The New York Times: Trump Justice Department Comey Justice Department sues 6 states seeking private voter data. The New York Times: Trump Justice Department Comey Trump live updates, president wants more indictments after the Comey won. The New York Times: Trump Justice Justice Department Comey Justice Department official pushes prosecutors to investigate the foundation of George Soros, the New York Times. Trump-Kirk actions, a broad wave of firings followed the Kirk assassination. The New York Times Trump national security apparatus, or lack of data gathered, ends intelligence report on future threats to U.S. The New York Times Trump at sports event Ryder Cup 2025 live update scores results, and the T-Times today, as Trump arrives with Europe in front, the athletic Trump tariffs. Trump may try to force drug makers to match European prices. The New York Times Trump and TikTok purchase from China. Trump clears way for American-owned TikTok valued at $14 billion. The New York Times Trump UN visit at the UN. Trump strikes radically different tones in public and private. The New York Times Trump denies unions for prison workers. Federal Bureau of Prisons ends union protections for workers. The New York Times Canada orders Postal Service to end door-to-door mail delivery. The New York Times Cuba American-born Assata Shakur dies at 78. Convicted revolutionary found refuge in Cuba. The New York Times Argentina U.S. tax dollars. Argentinian president is a strongman dictator and a Trump ally. Trump wades into bailout politics in offering a lifeline to Argentina. The New York Times United Kingdom progressives strategize versus the far right as right-wing populism rises. United Kingdom progressives meet to share tactics in London. The New York Times United Kingdom workplaces digital IDs are being introduced in the UK. Here is how they are expected to work. The New York Times United Kingdom hackers steal the data and photos of children from UK nursery chain. The New York Times United Kingdom, the kneecap rapper terrorism charge is dismissed by UK court. The New York Times Denmark briefly closes more airports after unexplained drone sightings. The New York Times Ukraine fashion, the war wounded at the Ukraine fashion week. War wounded models take to the catwalk. The New York Times Ukraine Russian assets frozen in Europe could help Ukraine in new plan. The New York Times Gambia prohibitive cost of travel. Gambians say thank you after US denied local officials visas to attend UN gathering. The New York Times China at UN. China casts itself as defender of international order. The New York Times the Philippines Manila area curiosity summons a reporter to an island known for the occult. The New York Times Taiwan Trump tariffs, giant brand bikes made in Taiwan barred by Trump administration. The New York Times headlines. The Guardian September 26, 2025. Consumers phones phone cards. If you are not using an eSIM when you travel, you are getting ripped off. Life and style. The Guardian consumers women period products. The rag trade, why reusable period products are a bloody good idea. Australian lifestyle. The Guardian Democrat targeted Republican Arizona lawmaker makes post calling for execution of Democratic Congresswoman. U.S. politics. The Guardian opioids teen opioid addictions often untreated as youth. Overdose deaths rapidly rise in U.S. study opioids crisis. The Guardian TV show from South Park v. Trump to AI slop aganda deepfakes are now part of the news cycle for better and for worse. Anna Broinowski. The Guardian TV star Democrat digested week. The Jimmy Kimmel suspension backfires with a Streisand effect. Return Emma Brox. The Guardian TV star Democrat Kimmel controversy highlights wildly dangerous consolidation of TV broadcasting. U.S. television industry. The Guardian Trump Justice Department Comey. The Trump Justice Department in full cover-up mode amid Comey indictment. House Democrat says live. Trump Justice Department Comey, who has Trump targeted so far besides Comey in his retribution campaign. Donald Trump. The Guardian Trump Justice Department Comey dangerous abuse of power. Lawmakers sound alarm over Comey indictment. James Comey. The Guardian Trump Justice Department Comey, how James Comey moved to the top of the Trump list of enemies. James Comey. The Guardian Trump versus the post office. Trump has called the Postal Service a joke. Do not expect Amazon to replace it. Knee of Roe. The Guardian Trump and TikTok purchase from China. The TikTok deal puts even more media in the hands of the very rich. Margaret Sullivan. The Guardian Argentina. Brazilian musician identified as victim of 1976 killing by Argentina military. Argentina. The Guardian Canada postal workers strike after government orders into door-to-door delivery. Canada. The Guardian Argentina drug traffickers live stream torture and killing of young Argentinian women and girl. Argentina. The Guardian France and Libya. The Nicolas Sarkozy lawyers will try to ensure the Sarkozy time in prison is as short as possible. Nicolas Sarkozy. The Guardian Cat's corner strategy with Tiger and Leone. Saying the quiet part out loud. Roar. Hi, I am Tiger. Our human asked us to get up from our naps and start Cat's corner strategy with Tiger and Leone. She gave us a list of internet allies which we will post for her here.
Hi, I am Leone. It is better for your mental fitness to go to these websites than to go to bro sites for advice. Substack letters from an American Heather Cox Richardson. Substack your local epidemiologist. The Midas Touch. The Guardian. The New York Times.
One introduction. RAWSEP view. The United States government was on track in the Biden administration to reduce the prices for both clean energy heat pumps and clean energy electric cars. Trump tariffs are expected to upset those plans to prevent future air pollution and prevent climate change. The United States government should, instead of certifying wood stoves as safe when they are not safe, go forward with regulations that ban wood stove use and direct government money for use of forest refuse only for home building and furniture building. For just a few examples of use of forest products for non-burning uses, it is well known from scientific and medical research that wood burning is a substantial source of PM 2.5 emissions. Yet the wood burning industry uses the scientifically debunked theory named carbon neutrality of wood burning to argue that wood burning replacing coal burning in industry, and in a trickle-down argument that wood burning should continue for home heating should continue. Presumably because it is called renewable, wood may be renewable in the sense that a tree can be planted in the place of a cut-down burned tree. But it takes centuries or decades for the newly planted tree to attain the stature of the cut-down burned tree. During those centuries or decades, photosynthesis, which converts CO2 to oxygen, and so sequesters some carbon, will not take place at the same rate as photosynthesis was performed previously, and wood burning emits both CO2 and PM 2.5, and PM 2.5 is Not absorbed by trees, so PM2.5 is not diminished by planting a tree in the place of a cut down and burn tree. In fact, a living tree closes its pores against the presence of PM2.5 from nearby wood burning, just as humans hold their breath in the presence of PM2.5 from nearby wood burning. And when a tree closes its pores, the level of photosynthesis that absorbs CO2 pollution goes down. Wood burning emits 90% PM2.5 particulate matter of 2.5 micrometer size, the perfect size to infiltrate the human lung, setting off a cascade of human health problems and early deaths. Contrary to many beliefs, wood burning emits 2.8 times the PM2.5 as the fossil fuel coal burning, and wood burning emits 450 times the PM2.5 as the fossil fuel natural gas burning. Replacing coal burning with wood burning creates more air pollution in the form of CO2 and PM2.5 than coal burning. This emission data comes from testing the cleanest burning wood stove in the United Kingdom. The Eco-Design Wood Stove and International Convention does not count the emissions from wood burning. The emissions from wood burning are erased from all countries around the world when calculating if each country has met its climate goals. This non-counting or erasure of wood burning emissions data from climate goals does not mean wood burning emissions do not exist. RAWSEP view purple air PM2.5 monitors hanging from the eaves of the house of a near neighbor should be used to measure the level of PM2.5 in the air hyperlocally in the yards of near neighbors of indoor residential wood burners. If PM2.5 levels exceed World Health Organization standards of 5 micrograms per cubic meter annually, then that evidence of air pollution from wood burning should lead to the shutdown of that indoor residential wood burning appliance, one appliance at a time if necessary.